from Silver Sun Astrology. I have with me today my dear friend Angelo, and he has his moon sign in Gemini. So we're going to talk about moon in Gemini compatibility with all the other moon signs. So welcome, Angelo. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, guys.
All right. So starting with, well, first of all, do you feel like there's any obstacles moon in Gemini faces in forming connections with others?
That's going to be like the most resounding no that I've ever given in my life. I don't think so.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like moon in Gemini is usually pretty good at connecting.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're feeling a connection with moon in Gemini, there's a good chance they're feeling some kind of connection too. So good news here for our potential suitors watching this. So moon in Aries, what kinds of experiences have you had with that moon placement?
The only one that comes to mind is my uncle. I remember when I was in college, I like moon in Aries because they're stereotypically very direct and impulsive in a very fun way. So I was in college, and we'd be at a bar, and he would be like, well, we're gonna, I'm gonna use you as bait, and then we're gonna chat up the bartenders. So Moon in Aries keeps it young. Like he would be like in his 40s or 50s, and he would always keep it young. And for me, I liked that as a moon in Gemini because I feel that moon in Gemini is perpetually leading with like their inner child. At least if like we feel comfortable with somebody, you can get the adult version of me in like a suit and tie, representing you as like your lawyer and all that. That's like, I don't know, that's like a Clark Kent identity, or that's like, some type of mask. But when we take off that adult suit, Moon in Gemini at their core is a child. And and with Moon in Aries people, they're so direct, honest, and impulsive and passionate that it mimics a lot of those childlike qualities. So there's a mutuality of getting along with each other. Like they like the energy that we bring because it's actually childlike, and then we like the energy that they bring because it reminds us of them, but we're not them. Like there are differences. But I get it.
There's definitely a lot of differences, but Moon in Aries with Moon in Gemini, you guys bring out that inner like childlike energy and excitability. Moon in Aries also really can overburden themselves with responsibility. They're the types to put a lot on their own plate to deal with. So I think having that opportunity to have Moon in Gemini bring out their inner child is probably very exciting for them too. Yeah. All right, moving on to Moon in Taurus. What kinds of experiences have you had with Moon in Taurus?
Moon in Taurus, I don't know how to answer this question because people with Moon in Taurus fall in my 8th house, and I'm also a 2nd house like dominant. But emotionally, I think where Moon in Taurus and Moon in Gemini connect is when Moon in Taurus people are stressed out, they like to distract themselves and dissociate heavily. And they do that with food, and they do that very stereotypically and honestly, it's the truth. And they do that with creature comforts. They'll do that with skincare. They'll do that with shopping for an expensive bag, booking a vacation. They will do those.
Or napping all day if they can't afford to book a vacation.
Yes, or napping all day. And Moon in Gemini dissociates and distracts themselves too, but in different ways that won't necessarily connect with the Moon in Taurus. So we might do it through video games. We might do it through watching a movie. We might do it through trolling people, on social media.
Do you feel like they understand your emotions?
What happened?
Do you feel like Moon in Taurus understands your emotions as someone with Moon in Gemini?
Well, I'm sort of getting there a little comprehensively, and I'm thinking about this one friend that I have that's a moon in Taurus, and we've had these experiences together where they will chill in their own way, and I will chill in my own way, and we'll be in the same space together, doing completely different things, but we're both relaxing with
Both
each
chilling.
other. We're both relaxing with each other with a knowledge that like we're here together, but she's off doing her own thing, I'm off doing my own thing. Neither one of us feels really neglected.
Okay, so the companionship is important to both of you.
I guess
I
so.
can see that being an overlap between those two signs. So that
Yeah.
definitely makes sense.
There is one experience though, because I want to get into the negatives. It's not all like, hunky dory. I
Okay.
remember she parked her car one time, and like she opened up her door and just like barely nicked the car next to her. Now immediately her instinct was like to jet off and like,
Oh,
out of
wow.
sight, out of mind, like she was just walking to where we were going, ignoring this guy. I recognize that like if you ignore this guy whose car you just nicked, you're going to get him upset and you're going to turn a non-issue into an issue. So I turned over to the guy and I was like, I paid attention to where the nick was. I validated whatever it could have been. And he's like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's barely even noticeable. And just by giving that person a little bit of attention, it neutralized that issue and it didn't explode into something. Whereas if it wasn't handled that way, it's very easy for the way that like Moon and
I
Taurus
agree.
handle certain situations to irritate people and to escalate something that could easily be
Hmm.
avoided as an issue. And then we got
Yeah.
into an argument and it was like, why'd you, and I'm like, do you understand people? You know, but Moon and Taurus is fixed Earth, and it's like, no, I don't want to deal with it. I thought it wasn't an issue, therefore I'm done. I'm carrying on about my day, and it's
Uh-huh.
like you're completely neglecting the other human being who has the voice, and like so there are a lot of these conflicts. We've definitely had our like philosophical clashes, but for the most part, they definitely share like chilling and vibing together.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Venus and not Venus, sorry. Moon in Gemini and Moon in Taurus. You guys have very different strengths, but you can kind of benefit from those differences in strength. And at the same time, it can create disagreements. But I mean, I see so much positive in that story too, because you helped prevent a disaster for her. And those types of situations arise in life all the time.
Yeah.
So moving on to Moon in Gemini with Moon in Gemini.
Moon in Gemini with Moon in Gemini. Um,
Too many people involved? Four people? Because each Gemini is like
yeah,
two.
yeah, I think so. I think it is too many people involved. It's a party of four,
Yeah.
and it's not being funny at all. It really is a party of four. It's two crackheads that are getting together. It really, it's yeah, it's two people that are just they have so much energy and they're so used to down regulating themselves that when they
Right.
realize
Yeah.
this is my twin, this is my twin, they both take turns turning it up, and they start triggering each other, and then the triggers of each other start making them introspect into like, hey, I can handle this. Holy crap, this is how I am. This is me. This like crazy person across from me is me.
Yeah.
And I think they both they'll either both come to the conclusion that I am too much, or they'll both come to the conclusion that this is somebody who's a friend for life.
Mm.
So it's one or the other.
Yeah. I have Moon in Capricorn, and I find with other people who have Moon in Capricorn, it can be easier to trust them. But I mean, having the same darknesses as someone else, the same flaws, can be a lot to deal with.
With Moon in Gemini, you can both entertain and perform for one another effortlessly and enjoy that. But because of that, you don't really know.
You
You
never
don't.
get deep.
You don't really know. Yeah, you don't get deep, and you don't really know. Um, is the other person across from me just performing, and are they performing to people please me in like an air type of way? Are they performing because they're just being mindlessly silly and they're like sort of they don't care and they're just trolling and they're just doing it for the lulz? That's very Gemini moon. Um, and you just don't really know with another Gemini moon. And you don't
I
even
wonder if
know.
other Gemini moons feel this way too, or if they feel like, oh, but the conversation's so good. So I would love to hear in the comments below how people really feel about this, because I mean, both can be true.
Conversations are fire all the time. I've
Mhm.
never
Yeah.
had better conversations. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So moving on to Moon in Cancer with Moon in Gemini.
Okay. Moon in Cancer. Moon in Cancer. I've had a 10.5 year relationship with a Moon in Cancer. And I want to say the biggest tension astrologically, right, is Moon in Gemini and Moon in Cancer. Moon in Cancer is genuinely emotional, and Moon in Gemini is genuinely not emotional. We can be, but our default is not.
Yeah,
And
you guys still have intense feelings, but it's not like emotional all the time.
yeah, and I think the way that kind of connection can break down very easily is from both sides, but from the point of view of the Gemini moon person, I think water moons have to understand that air moons and really Gemini moon and maybe Aquarius moon too, when somebody is emoting and they're like, I'm offended, I'm hurt, you made me feel this way, all we're hearing and all we're thinking is I am faking emotion to manipulate you, to get you to change your behavior so you can do what I want.
But that's
That
not really what's going on, right?
it may very well not be, but that is our
Mhm.
default. That is our default
Yeah. Okay.
interpretation of the situation.
Because everybody projects, everybody expects that everyone else is going to act the same way we do and process the same things we do. But I think the more we become aware of astrology, moon signs specifically, the more we can counteract this problem that we face.
Well, for air moons and Gemini moon, like I can only speak to my personal experiences with moon. Is I mean, later on we'll get to my Aquarius moon friend, but Gemini moons will intellectualize emotions. We'll have cognitive empathy.
And you
Uh,
can talk your way out of emotions too. Like, this emotion doesn't make sense, so I'm not going to have it. And like water moons, and even for me as a Capricorn moon, I feel like I can't do that. And I think most people feel like they can't do that.
yeah, the logical bypass on air moons is like a default setting. It's very strong. So and that's what it's not so much projection as much as it is our experience is that anytime we see that kind of like emotionality,
You're suspicious.
it's not well received. It's
Mm-hmm.
just automatically seen as dishonest, manipulative, fake,
Wow. That's
weaponized victim.
dark.
Yeah,
That's
weapon.
so dark.
Yeah, weaponized victimhood. So
Harsh.
and when that's something that Cancer moons can pick up on, they're not really hurt that you're not validating their emotions. They're not really hurt
But they don't either.
because they're not getting their way. I think what hurts them is their awareness of your perception of them.
Right. Yeah.
And they're like, and they start questioning themselves and they're like, wait a second, is that what I'm
Oh,
really doing? Is that what I'm really,
yikes.
right? Is that
That's
what
a
I'm
big
really,
issue.
yeah. Because Cancer Moon can be kind of gaslighty too. So they know that they have those tendencies, but they sort of question themselves with the Gemini moon, because the Gemini moon is just automatically mistrustful of like emotionality. So when when you have a Cancer moon and Gemini moon relationship, the Cancer moon person is like, why does the Gemini moon person feel this way? Because for the most part, Gemini moon is really sincere with like their feelings, or at least their thoughts. They don't really have the feelings; they have the thoughts. So if that's their thought, they're going to verbalize it. They're going to let you know how they feel, and it's honestly how what they're thinking. So the Cancer moon is probably just like, I can't believe they think this way about me,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hurtful for the Cancer moon. So that's where I could see those relationships having a lot of tension.
Yeah, Moon and Gemini with Moon and Cancer, I think you guys would wind up dancing around issues a lot and then become kind of like closed off and distanced towards each other just because you can't confront things in a way that feels healthy, safe, and peaceful for both of you and like believable, you know? Like, because you guys do process emotions pretty differently. And one of the things that I think these two signs have in common is the types of instances that will cause you to become avoidant, and not like the reasons behind the avoidance, but just the times that you choose to become avoidant. And then when you have two people being avoidant, you never really get to like the meat of what's actually going on. All right, so Moon in Leo with Moon in Gemini, what do we think?
I love this. I love Leo moons. Um, I love Leo moons. I have a friend who's a Leo moon, and then I had a love of my life ex who is a Leo moon. So I'll start with a friend that's a Leo moon. When when you are friends with a Leo moon and the stakes, the romantic stakes are non-existent and it's just a friendship, you get to see a very vulnerable part of Leo.
That's good.
And
Yeah, because Leo can like fluff itself up and try to not be vulnerable and just be prideful.
yeah, but you get to see somebody who is starting from zero self-esteem. And that's actually healthy in my opinion, because you have to start from the bottom and have a solid foundation. And with this Leo moon friend, frequently I often we often get into conversations where they take themselves down to zero self-esteem, and
And
then
admit
from
their insecurities, really.
yeah, and then from there they are looking for their like close confidence to reassure them, validate them from a completely vulnerable position. And then from there on, they're solid. Like once they come out of those conversations, they're solid. And we like that as a Gemini moon, because for us, it's intellectually interesting. So we like the logic behind why they feel the way that they feel, especially
Yeah.
if it's like dark and catastrophic, because it sort of helps us too. It's like, wow, this is actually a person who's going there emotionally, and it helps us connect with that part, which maybe we can't feel the way that they do, but we can follow the logical thinking behind the emotions. Um,
So
romantic,
Gemini moon helps Leo moon figure things out and make the emotions make sense, almost like you're rebuilding the experience, putting the puzzle pieces together so that you can explain it. And then Leo moon in turn is helping Gemini moon feel things and become
yeah,
more in tune with their emotional side. That's
yes,
cool.
yeah, yeah, very very nice dynamic. Romantically, I had I was seeing this person who was like a Paris Hilton in a way. She
Paris
was like,
Hilton does have moon in Leo too.
oh, she does.
He does, yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, so she was like a local nightlife celebrity, and she was like the party girl, the it girl. We'd easily go to like three different clubs a night, and all these promoters like wanted her attention. She enjoyed the attention, and I think from her experience, any person who could have dished out like a constant supply of attention and validation was like drugs for her. And if anybody's going to do that, it's going to be Gemini Moon. Gemini Moon can hyper focus on you and can hyper analyze everything about you and just conversationally and verbally dish it out.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, I would argue Venus and Gemini can probably provide that same level of affection.
Yeah, I mean, Gemini for sure. And then in terms of like intimacy, Leo Moon tends to have a little bit of a praise kink, or at the very least, they enjoy being like worshipped. And in order to give that properly, you have to be very like intellectually attentive.
Yeah.
In
I
real
don't usually associate with the moon with kinks, but I do associate the moon with needs. So I can acknowledge that truth in what you're saying, but I do want to clarify that, you know, that there might be some other like variations and people who feel like they're almost the opposite of this, but just try to recognize the truth in like what's being said at the same time, because this is just one part of who you are. If your moon's in Leo, it's just one part of who you are.
Yeah, that's true. And I think this person was a Leo rising and a Leo Mars. So
That's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot to contribute to that.
yes. So take I guess what I'm saying with a grain of salt, but in the sense that they definitely love being like the focus of another person's attention. Um, Gemini Moon enjoys giving that to somebody.
Nice.
So if they love receiving it, we love giving it. And yeah, I think just walking through these right now, I'm seeing Aries Moon, I like that energy. Leo Moon, I like that energy with Gemini Moon.
Yeah, both of those are sexed out because Gemini's in the middle of those two signs. So
Yeah.
those are traditionally good compatibilities. Next, we have Moon in Virgo with Moon in Gemini, which makes a square aspect, which could be more difficult. What do you think about that, Angelo?
I have a friend who's a moon in Virgo. I had somebody who I dated just one date who was a moon in Virgo, and then I had somebody who I dated for more than one date who was a moon in Virgo, allegedly, supposedly. I don't know.
Like a bad habit, or was it a good experience?
Um, so I'm going to start with a friendship because I feel like the friendship shows you more authentically.
What's going on with each person,
Yeah, what's
really?
going on with each person because the romantic interest is just not there. So they're both Mercury ruled
Yes.
moons, but they're different. So Virgo moon is like a sniper, and Gemini moon is like a machine gunner. And we just have like this library collection of like information like Beauty and the Beast, and we're just pulling things out and making like these random connections
For better
between
or for worse.
exactly they're genuinely completely random, and sometimes it's just crazy ideas, and sometimes it's just like a stroke of madness that ends up being
Oh.
accidental genius.
Yeah,
So
I can see that being great and inspirational and so much fun. But when emotions get involved, like deep emotions that tend to come about in a romantic relationship, that can actually become dangerous because then you're both like weaponizing information and weaponizing different perspectives on things. And
well, I it's the connection between Virgo and Gemini moon is there for as long as they're both analyzing. If they're both in their heads and analyzing and philosophizing and having these stimulating conversations, it works well. The moment that Virgo tells Gemini doesn't have such a concept like things should be. We're allergic to the word should.
But Virgo does. Virgo definitely does.
Virgo has a very solid
Mm-hmm.
appreciation for how things should be, how people
Yes,
should
the world
behave.
was perfect.
Yeah, how the relationship should be, how I should be feeling. And when you violate their sense of should be, they get upset.
They do.
And then when they get upset because you violated their sense of should be, Gemini moon feels like now you're trying to control me. Now you're trying to impose your rules onto me. And we're not about that. Like, I don't impose my rules onto you. We expect like the same sort of energy. So that's been my experience with friends, with in romantic relationships. Uh,
Yeah, because Gemini is always just kind of like trying on these different perspectives, and
yeah,
Virgo's more like committed to the right way, and then they feel like there's definitely a wrong way, and then Gemini's like, what if this? What if that? You know?
yeah. So in romantic relationships, it's very easy for Virgo to get the ick over nonsensical things, which ironically, once they do,
Wait, did you say nonsensical things?
nonsensical things.
Oh, see, I don't agree with that, but okay. Go on, Gemini moon. You be yourself.
But when they do, it ironically gives Gemini moon the ick because we're very open and accepting. And it's like
Like, wow, that's a strong opinion you got there.
yeah, I know, right?
You don't like that.
We don't we like somebody who is open and accepting, and Virgo moon tends to not be open and accepting. there
Right.
are,
Yeah.
I'm sure there are like variations of Virgo moon people that are more like spiritual,
Mhm.
um, but for the most part Virgo moon in my experience has struck me like the accountant, or has struck me like the librarian, or just like
Can be like a matriarch too, and a matriarch is the leader of the family, so that puts you in like the authoritative position. Whereas Moon and Gemini is more like the philosopher who like likes to inspire people but isn't committed, like is exploring different ways of life, is just bringing about new ideas.
I think that's accurate. I think that's very accurate, and that's the tension between those two.
Very understandable. I can relate to that too with the signs that are square to my own placements. That's how it tends to be. All right, so Moon in Libra. What have we got to say?
I've seen both sides of Moon and Libra, so I've
Libra
had
can have an ugly side. Like Libra's known for beauty and harmony and peace, but Libra can have an ugly side.
yeah, I've seen it. So I so I've had my worst relationship with a Moon in Libra, and I've had arguably arguably probably my best relationship with a Moon in
Oh
Libra.
gosh, now people are going to be trying to figure out which is which. They're like, which
Yeah,
one is he talking about?
yeah, I think Moon in Libra Moon in Libra is ugly with Moon in Gemini when Moon in Libra isn't accepting of like Gemini's inherent chaotic high energy nature, and Moon in Libra themselves is like messy. So they're
Right,
trying.
right, right. Because Libra definitely has a lot of its own chaos, but might be kind of in denial about it. You know, like their shit don't stink, that kind of thing.
Yes. So I'll leave that at that. But I think both of those air signs need to recognize. Gemini Moon needs to recognize that Moon in Libra is the teenager of the water moon signs. So Gemini Moon's the child. Um, Libra Moon is definitely the teenager. They're not the adult in the room. They are the teen. They could be a very mature teenager, or they could be the stereotypical,
Right. Yeah. And if anyone's a little bit confused about like that concept, you can always look at the zodiac wheel almost as like a level of, I don't want to say maturity because it almost sounds offensive when we say it that way, but like a level of aging, a level of existence. And the further something is in the zodiac wheel, which starts with Aries and then eventually ends with Pisces, the further it is in the wheel, the older it is. And I mean, with that comes like wisdom and perspective and spirituality even. But then the younger signs tend to have like very vibrant, upbeat, and like, you know, like really intensely living in their bodies types of things. Whereas the older signs tend to like have more like gradually living more in their spirit and seeing things from like a more outside perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, that was an interesting experience. So I think Gemini Moon people need to recognize that you want to look up to Moon in Libra. There's definitely a fantasy or projection of maturity that you could make, but if you do that, it's not always going to be accurate. And I think, you know, for couples at least, the Moon in Libra person has to recognize that Moon in Gemini, they can turn it on like maturity when it's absolutely necessary. In their relationship, they don't want a relationship where maturity is absolutely necessary. They want a relationship where they can relax and let go with their significant other.
That makes
So,
sense.
you know, if Libra Moon has this expectation of like, I'm with somebody and I expect them to be mature with me all the time, that's going to be like a fundamental clash with a Gemini Moon person in a romantic relationship.
Interesting. Yeah. You know what? I can kind of relate to that because I have an Earth Moon sign. And with other Earth Moon signs, I do sense like similar clashes. And normally you would say if it's the same element, it's compatible. But I think with each luminary or planet, that can work differently. And like with moon signs, I feel the same way Angelo does about that. And I explained earlier in a previous video that the astrological chart is like a bunch of math you have to do, and you add everything up to figure out what kind of person you actually wind up with and what kinds of things they actually need in life. So it is going to be a little bit different for everyone, but I think that was an interesting moment of like clarity, you know, hearing this perspective. So are we ready to move on to the next moon sign?
No, because I sort of grilled Libra Moon, and I do want
Okay,
to
you gotta
say,
say something positive now.
I do want to say, you know, the positive things that are due and owing, which is when Libra Moon people have been through it, harmony, like art, right, comes from pain, and they've already endured and been hurt and suffered and struggled, and it either breaks somebody or molds them into something beautiful. And I remember having this one moment with my partner, who, I mean, I was so excited and trying to find the words to express something, and I was just having like the stereotypical Gemini Moon like free association of ideas, and she just slowed down and said, "Hey, just take your time and say it however it comes to mind, and we'll figure it out." And just that like really simple thing of somebody not rushing me and giving me permission to express it how I wanted to express it, and showing me like, you're not judging and you are accepting, you know, how I am and how I think. That was the moment where it's like, I'm yours. I,
Yeah.
that's all I need. And that's really the subtle beauty of when Moon in Libra is like sitting comfortably in somebody's chart and somebody's life, and they've really like mastered it. It's such a beautiful energy that Moon in Gemini absolutely needs and values. We value it so much, so much. So like, if you're a Moon in Libra person and you're romantically involved with a Moon in Gemini, if you give that to Moon in Gemini, they're not going anywhere. That's your person right there. That's your person. So that's it.
So Moon and Libra can like be a positive role model for Moon and Gemini and like
Yeah.
give them that kind of like guiding hand to help them through a tough situation. And a lot of times the tough situations are like about how we cognitively process things, especially for someone who has a mind as active as Moon and Gemini. And I can see how that can be applied to other same element pairings as well, where you can like give each other that hand to help each other through issues. And sometimes it's an issue where you need to stop putting so much pressure on yourself and stop being so mature and like, back off from life a little bit. So it can go both ways. And I'm sure that she has instances where it's felt the same way for her, but like for different reasons. So now we will move on to Moon and Scorpio with Moon and Gemini.
Okay.
This is a tough one.
This is normally tough. I have not experienced this in romantic relationships. I don't think I've been with somebody who's had their moon in Scorpio.
And you can almost like, I know it's sun signs versus moon signs, but since your sun is in Scorpio, you can even like relate back to the relationship you have with yourself, almost like it's two different parts of yourself.
Yeah. So my brother is a moon in Scorpio, and he's an Aquarius sun. So I'm a Scorpio, Mercury, Venus, Sun, and Pluto, and they're all like conjunct except my sun. My sun's late degree, but I have enough conjunctions with my Scorpio Mercury where I realize the way that I think consciously is how he's a Sagittarius rising, so he's a 12th house Scorpio moon. So he really struggles with processing those subconscious parts of him. And
Yep.
every time we talk and have a conversation, it's clear that a Scorpio moon is going extremely deep into their authentic subconscious feelings, not thoughts, feelings.
Okay.
And as a Gemini, my Scorpio placements aside, I mean, my Scorpio Mercury absolutely helps me relate to Scorpio moons. So I'm not going to just not mention that at all. That's absolutely a thing. But similar to how Leo moon, sort of breaks themselves down to zero and then builds themselves back up again. Scorpio moon is a little bit different from my perspective as a Gemini moon. And this is my brother. I've known him my whole life, right? They're going to take where they are currently and they're going to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And when you think you've reached zero with a Scorpio moon, they're like, technically we have negative numbers. So they will just keep going down and down.
Oh my gosh. No, I really feel like every Moon and Scorpio person needs a Moon and Gemini friend now. Like, I mean, this is like my new message to the world. If you have Moon and Scorpio, go find a Moon and Gemini friend.
Well, I don't know if you need it, but it's definitely interesting because...
Oh, they need it. Trust me, they need it.
Because from their point of view, right, they need a sounding board. Because if they don't have a sounding board, it's very easy to go crazy. And we're a great sounding board. From our point of view, we love the depth and accuracy.
It's like the best science experiment.
Yeah, it's the best science experiment, and it doesn't involve us.
Documentable results and everything.
Yeah, it's somebody else who's completely suffering and going through it, and being able to have access to it and verbalize it.
I don't know if Moon and Scorpio would like the way you worded that, though. They're going to be like, whoa, these are my emotions, I keep them in here for a reason.
They are. They absolutely are. But for us, it's fascinating. So I think Gemini, I think it could be a mutually beneficial growth relationship, because both of those moon signs really value growth. So Scorpio moon we've had a lot of conversations where we're in the thick of it, and my brother will just be like, pause, stop, I need to write this down. And like he opens up his note app and he just jots down like a 1 or 2 liner, and he's like, that's going in my philosophy book. Like when I write one. Um,
Cute.
so because you synthesize like emotion, you intellectualize emotion, and that's
Mhm.
interesting for the Scorpio moon person. And then for the Gemini moon
Mhm.
person, it's like I can intellectualize and logically bypass feelings, but it's difficult for us to like really access them, and you can access them.
Yeah, yeah, and I think Moon in Gemini gets a reputation for being shallow, but that's really something you guys do to yourself when you constantly choose to logically bypass your emotions, like you
Yeah,
said.
yeah,
And that basically just means you're using the logic to like talk yourself out of the emotion, like, oh, this emotion makes sense, so I'm not going to let myself, it doesn't make sense, so I'm not going to let myself feel it. But
yeah,
then Moon in Scorpio helps you learn how to become more deep and like explore those deeper feelings and root into them, feel comfortable exploring them.
yeah. So that's an ironic, mutable and fixed water air relationship, whether it's friendship or a family, that that can definitely be beneficial for both people. I'm not sure how it will play out romantically. I haven't had that experience myself, but I would imagine that it would probably feel like the opposite of how I feel with Gemini Venus as
Mm.
a Scorpio Venus.
Oh
So
yeah, so we just did a video about that, so they can go watch that video to gain some
yes,
perspective.
yeah, I think if I was dating somebody who was a Scorpio moon, they would probably be extremely frustrated and eventually hurt by Gemini moon just sort of seeming a little absent-minded or emotionally
Right.
disconnected.
Seeming like you don't care enough.
Yeah, but I think people just have to. I think water moons have to understand about air moons in general, but Gemini moon in particular. We've been children, right? And we've been innocent and we've been vulnerable. And when you have that much of a clean slate, all it takes is one thing to hurt you. And from that moment forth, Gemini moon will just be ethereal emotionally. It will not allow itself to get hurt again. So
Mhm.
there's no capacity to hurt it again.
Right.
Its defense mechanisms are just like out of this world. So
Yeah, I've used the term emotional stunt double for
yeah.
Moon and Gemini. I think I have that coined at this point.
So for Scorpio Moon, if they're looking to validate that how their partner feels about them based on feelings, that's going to be a bad litmus test with a Gemini Moon.
I
It's
can
going to
understand that. As a Moon and Capricorn person who comes across as non-emotional but is actually emotional, I've had that experience with Moon and Scorpio myself, and it's for different reasons. Like I think when Moon and Scorpio made that assessment on me, it was inaccurate, but it's accurate at least on some level with Moon and Gemini. And again, I'm not saying you guys don't have emotions. I know you guys have deep feelings. You just don't express them in the way that a Moon and Scorpio person would expect emotions to be expressed.
yeah.
All right, so next is Moon in Sagittarius, which would be your opposite. So how does that go with Moon in Gemini?
Okay. So I have a my father is the moon in Sagittarius. Additionally, I had this friend from high school who's the moon in Sagittarius, and if there was anything that could convince me of astrology, it's the stereotypes about moon in Sagittarius. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, and if you want to see the opposite type of relationship, the Gemini moons love to talk a lot, but it's sharing information. It's
Hmm.
not sharing their personal beliefs.
Right, yeah,
It's literally I learned this info and I stored it and I'm just sharing it with you.
right. You
Uh,
have to be neutral about it. And like the receiving person even has to be neutral about it.
It's just, I am the messenger. It's not my message.
Mhm. Yeah.
Sagittarius is the philosopher. So it's like,
Mhm.
I've taken all this information.
Right, like the for real philosopher. You're like the pretend philosopher that's like, I'm just throwing things out here.
And
I'm
I'm
not
fine with
saying to
that.
live this way.
And I'm fine with that. We are trivia knowledge. Gemini moon is trivia knowledge. Sagittarius moon is like, I'm this old, I have these personal experiences, I know this information, I've put it through my brain, I've distilled it, and I'm giving you what I believe is like the truth of life.
Right, trying to live righteously, truthfully, based on whatever their own personal perspective is.
Yeah. So we actually, I've never clashed more with another moon sign than with Sagittarius moon,
Mhm.
because I feel like I just want to know information. I have my own brain.
Like, this is just for fun. You take it so seriously.
Yeah, like I can analyze facts myself. I can discuss opinions as opinions, not as facts. But with a
Mhm.
Sagittarius moon person, no, my opinion is the truth. My 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 opinion is the
This
law.
is
It's
the way of
fact.
the world. Yes.
Yeah. And that is such a clash that
Uh-huh.
I think at this point when somebody tells me they're a Sagittarius moon, they're just automatically kept at a distance. Like I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with
Oh,
it. Yeah. Uh,
that's interesting. I don't feel like that degree of issue with Moon in Cancer, which is my opposite. But again, like it depends on so many other things, and everybody operates differently. And the difference between Moon in Gemini versus Moon in Sagittarius is going to be like way different from the difference between Moon in Cancer with Moon in Capricorn. Because I mean, there's always some overlap of similarity, but sometimes those things can be things that don't go well together.
the other thing I've seen with my experiences with Moon in Sagittarius is there's a stereotype of Gemini Moon not shutting up, right?
Which I mean, I don't find super accurate. Like I think Gemini moons still always think more than they talk. And for me, sometimes I feel like they're very quiet, but they can be so wise when they communicate, which I know wise might be an ironic choice of words, especially after everything we've discussed here. But I personally do feel that I consider Moon and Gemini to be wise and like but willing to experiment. And that's kind of like where the wisdom comes from.
They definitely have a really like chaotic neutral energy. Chaotic
Yeah,
neutral.
I can agree.
Like I in social functions where I'm there with the Sagittarius moon, I'll start getting excited, and that's
Hmm.
where I sort of lose touch with other people and how they're feeling. But once I
Mm.
come back to a set and reading the room and realizing like I'm talking, but nobody really cares, nobody's really listening, I
We've all
will.
had those moments.
I'll. I'll.
I just look
I'll
around and I'm like, who's gonna listen? Okay, you're gonna listen. I'm gonna keep talking.
yeah. So I'll dial it back and tune back in with what people are saying, and I'll actually listen and be present because I know that whatever I was saying has outlived its useful life.
Okay.
Sagittarius moon has such a problem self-regulating in that way. They will just be like, "Do you
Hmm.
want to hear a joke?" And the vibe of the room is like, "No, we don't." And they're like,
I
"I'm going to
don't
tell you
know.
10."
The ones I've encountered, I don't feel like they're like that. Like I don't know. Maybe it's my moon in Capricorn, and I don't know. I like sure. I've definitely felt like they've told some jokes that were inappropriate for like the situation, or just jokes that were inappropriate in general. It's interesting to hear someone else's perspective on like a moon sign, though. We can both be looking at the same thing and have a different opinion on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's my experience with Sagittarius moon. The clash there is how much importance you put on your conclusions about information and life
Yeah.
as superior to others.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, I mean, I genuinely feel like Sagittarius moon, I'm having trouble talking today. Happy Mercury retrograde, y'all. But Sagittarius moon can come to any conclusion about life that they want to based on their own personality and what they personally feel called to do in this life. And as an example, I'm not saying I know anyone who does this, but as an example, they could legitimately decide, hey, my job in life is to play the field as much as possible. Like, just romantically play the field and just go around and date everybody and sample everything. And they could feel like that's my personal calling, that's my personal truth. And like that's the level of like I hate this word choice, but opinionated righteousness that they're capable of. And sometimes, you know, there's manifestations of that can be very, very admirable. And they're doing these like profound, amazing things. And then there's these other situations where it's like, you are doing something that seems very unsavory, but you feel so good about it for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So should we move on?
Yeah.
Moon in Capricorn, which is actually my moon sign, with moon in Gemini. So what is this compatibility like?
This is going to be like another split, like the way it was with Libra. I don't know if that's a cardinal thing. So I have a couple of Moon in Capricorn friends, and
I'm one of
yes, and you are one of them. And I want to say that as friends, the reason this works well is because we don't strongly emote.
right, yeah. So I mean, moon in Capricorn is not going to raise moon in Gemini suspicions the same way moon in Cancer or any other water moon would. But I don't know. I do feel like moon in Capricorn has this element of us where it's like secretly a water moon sign because we got that fishtail, but we just like suppress it really effectively.
Maybe you guys do because we've known each other for years, and I I can't say I've seen you. You've had your vulnerable moments, but I can't say that I've
I've
seen.
literally called you crying before. Like, how many people in my life have I called crying before? I can definitely count that on one hand because I can think of maybe two, and you're one of them. You're honestly the
Okay,
only one I can think of for sure.
but you know, like that, and you did, but it was so warranted. It was so like
It was,
obvious,
yeah.
you
It
know.
was very justified.
Yeah, yeah. That was like very. If a water moon is to call me crying, it would be like that over like I don't know, somebody
Right.
didn't text me back or some,
And the
or
way
like
I look at that
yeah.
is water moon signs have emotions more easily. And I don't think that's a bad thing. And I don't judge them for it. I even kind of appreciate them and admire them for it because I'm over here like struggling to have an emotion. And I very early on started describing it as emotional constipation. Like I think moon in Capricorn is constantly emotionally constipated. And I've even heard other moon and Capricorn people take that term and start using it too.
And I'm happy you raised that because I think the analogy for Capricorn moon and Gemini moon is Gemini moon is Capricorn moon's Miralax, emotional Miralax,
What does it mean, relax?
to relieve the emotional constipation. It's like a laxative.
I don't feel okay. Yeah, so I caught you crying one time, and you take it out of context, huh? Is that how it goes? You're
Well,
like,
no,
oh, I need to be relaxed.
because if you like you've had Scorpio moon relationships as a Capricorn moon, and they're different. They're different in the sense that they almost force you to emote, and you can't, and you want to.
I mean, I feel like I can. No, you're right though, because like I feel like I'm emoting, and I'm trying really hard to emote, and they tend to feel like she's not emoting; she's just being manipulative. Similarly to how you felt that Moon in Cancer was manipulative. I
yes,
mean, I get that too, even as Moon in Cancer's opposite. But it's like I genuinely have emotion. I'm struggling to like
yeah.
express it. So I mean, I have an opposition to Mercury, which gives me another point of reference to relate to Moon in Gemini, and I will just like flat out verbally express how I'm feeling. And it sometimes will sound so dry, but it is genuinely how I'm feeling.
And I think that's the harmony between those two moon signs.
Right. We can seem very reasonable. Like we can both almost kind of go through life acting like we don't have emotions.
Yeah, and Gemini Moon could feel, but is like 100% in control of not choosing to not feel and not feeling,
Hmm.
and instead logically bypassing. And I think who that helps is, out of all the Earth moons, Capricorn Moon, because with Capricorn Moon, the feelings are there,
Hmm.
right? They're just not accessible the way that they are with like a Scorpio Moon. They're not as automatic like a
I
Cancer Moon.
still, I feel like a victim of my own emotions the same way a water moon would. I just express it totally differently.
I think like we've had conversations where we can have a logical breakdown and deconstruction of the rationality of feelings, and you'll be like, okay, I understand.
Right. Yeah.
It's I understand as opposed to I feel.
But here's the thing, I
Yeah.
don't think I ever am, like when it comes to emotional situations, I don't think I ever truly am going to act on logic. And that's just like fundamentally deep down, that's the way I am. And even though I
Yeah.
can like explore the logic and try to do the whole logically bypassing thing, I'm going to make a lot of decisions in life that don't make any logical sense.
Is that because of your Capricorn Moon though?
No, I think that's like, that's really part of it. So Capricorn moon can at least, like, we have a good head on our shoulders and we can get through the rough parts of life and continue to function and continue to do our day-to-day tasks. But when it comes to what we really want deep down, if we try to deny that, I feel like sooner or later we're always going to have a breakdown, and we can delay the breakdown for many years. You know, there's other people who will have the breakdown immediately, but we delay it for so long, and then by the time we do have a breakdown, it tends to be really bad.
Yeah. I know from my friendships with you and another Capricorn Moon that it's strangely like refreshingly grounding to just talk about emotions in a non-emotional way, and
Hmm.
it just makes it mutually feel safe and normal. And this is like a structured way of being vulnerable with somebody, but not really being vulnerable with somebody, but actually really genuinely being vulnerable, just not out of control emotionally. You know, just it follows a certain structure. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah, that's my opinion on those types of dynamics.
Yeah, I think there's a lot these two signs have in common, but the deep down fundamental needs might be different. So I would be interested to hear if anyone out there has successful relationship, like romantic relationship specifically between Moon and Gemini and Moon and Capricorn. So are we ready to move on to Moon and Aquarius?
Yes.
All right, Moon and Aquarius with Moon and Gemini. What do you think of it, Angelo?
I have two really beautiful examples in my mind, and I'm not going to mention names or identifying information to protect both. One, because I legally can't. One of them is a client, um, and two, my really close friend, which we actually met on Facebook. She was, I'll say, shopping around for a Greek husband, and that was our
Two or
first.
three.
Yeah, that was our first interaction, and I had just come out of I got divorced, and then I had just come out of a relationship with Aquarius number one. Uh, so I told her honestly and sincerely that, look, I'm flattered, but I'm not looking myself, and I'm also not in the headspace to be open to something like that right now. And I
And
think,
what happened?
well, so they, not because they're an Aquarius moon, right? They were Cancer, and they had their Cancer moment, and they cried. They had a little mini meltdown breakdown, and venting about all the past relationships and how this always happens to them, whatever. But after they got over that, moment, the Cancer moment, the Aquarius moon kicked in and they realized, hey, he's still on the phone with me. And
Right.
and I said, listen, I don't know you. We're strangers at that point. I said, listen, I don't know you, but I can tell that what would really benefit you in your life right now is just to see that people can just be friends. And I think you need that more than you need another romantic partner. So we exchanged information. We took it from Facebook Messenger to text message, and we eventually met up in person. And we're friends till this day.
Interesting.
And we're really good friends. And we've had a lot of really close moments together because we were emotional moments together, but we're able to depersonalize. And that's really the key between Mars and Aquarius and I'm sorry, not Mars and Aquarius, Moon and Aquarius.
For some reason, it's hard to say the word moon today. We're saying
Yeah,
moon, Venus, everything
it's
else.
Mercury retrograde for sure. So Moon in Aquarius and Moon in Gemini. Moon in Aquarius and Moon in Gemini, beautiful energy. I look up to Moon in Aquarius, and they, in a way, appreciate how Moon in Gemini is both infantile and at the same time, ironically, there's like a brilliance to the child, right? Like, do you ever have
Right.
those moments where you look at a child doing something or saying
Yes. Yeah.
and making these revelations, and it's like they're
Yeah.
so close to the source, they haven't been corrupted yet, and they just so there's a
Oh, but I
direct
don't think anyone would refer to Moon and Gemini as having been corrupted yet.
yeah
Just to be fair.
yes
Children, yes. Moon and Gemini, no. Now, if it's a child with Moon and Gemini, maybe.
yeah so I think that's a beautiful dynamic in relationship because you can depersonalize anybody wanting something from the other person, and it's just pure friendship, and that's what made that relationship beautiful. And then my second experience with a moon in Aquarius was a client who was an Aries sun, and but with their moon in Aquarius. And this particular client um, had some mood regulation issues, and at one point they straight up punched me in the face. They took half an hour to compose themselves, and then they came outside. I was still there, right, as their lawyer, and they just had this revelation that I just hit my lawyer in the face. So they came out, and he couldn't make eye contact because he understood that this was not his finest moment. But he did say, "I'm sorry." And I looked at him and I said, "That's okay. Gentlemen forgive each other." And just like that, yeah,
You're like, that's
just
how little I care about anything. Like Moon and Gemini's capacity to care. Perfect example right here,
yes.
Angela.
No, because no. Well, here's the thing: you could have in that moment recognized that you could have attributed to this person normalcy and disregarded what that they suffer from, and you could have taken that personally because you could have given it the meaning of this guy's an asshole. How the fuck could he do? I mean, how the can he do that? Sorry if I cursed, but I recognize that this is a person who is genuinely suffering from a mood regulation disorder or challenge, and he himself hates that about him. And he felt a deep sense of shame for something that wasn't 100% fully within his control. So I know who I am. I'm not being demeaned or degraded in any kind of way. I know that that's not objectively acceptable, but when somebody has that moment, and you see that they've come back to regulating their mood, and they're taking accountability and they're apologizing, are you gonna punish somebody for reaching that headspace? Or are
Right. And
you,
this is definitely the benefit of what we formerly referred to as logical bypassing of emotions. I mean, you're able to not have emotions when it's like essentially not fair to, or when it seems like you have reason to see things a different way.
yeah, you're absolutely right. This is a good example of the benefits of logical bypassing, because by not making it emotional, you're actually ironically able to more deeply connect with that person.
And show compassion.
Yes, with no emotion. And
Hmm.
that's something that, I don't know, water signs can take some notes on. Uh,
I mean, I think to some extent we all are the way that we are, and we just have to be
yeah,
grateful for your blessings, but then like try to handle ourselves as best as we can.
yeah. And ever since then, we've I've loved this client. I've been connected with this client. He's been admittedly self admittedly a difficult client, but it's one of those relationships where you can't let go. And also, we've had a lot of moments where we call them like whiteboard meetings or whiteboard sessions, where like the consultants come in and you open up like the whiteboards and like you have like these brainstorming sessions. The way that high functioning Moon in Gemini and Moon in Aquarius in the same room can just create the most insanely brilliant things in like a whiteboard session, or just over dinner, just conversating and brainstorming together
Yeah.
in
I feel
terms.
like that's an air sign thing, and a lot of air signs they can benefit from that with other people, even if it's not about the moon sign, even if it's sun signs, rising signs, maybe.
Yeah, but Aquarius and Gemini energy, it like they can just make brilliant magic together. So I think they're going to find that, especially in a romantic relationship, they're going to find that very intellectually stimulating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, one left to go. Moon in Pisces with Moon in Gemini. What do we think?
Okay.
It's
I'm
an
gonna.
air aspect, so it's naturally going to be a bit challenged.
Yeah. I'm gonna give this one personally for myself. My mother is a Pisces Sun, Pisces Moon, Pisces Mercury, and I've had at least two romantic partners now that were Pisces moons. There's just too much of an emotional disconnect. There's
Mm,
just too much of a
not
subconscious,
understanding each other.
yeah, too much of a subconscious disconnect, and like that whole thing, that whole instance that I just described with my Aquarius moon
Which one
client.
with you? Moon in Aquarius.
If yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, moon and Aquarius client. If that would have happened with a moon in Pisces, the police would be involved.
Hmm.
And not only would the police be involved, there would be a nonprofit organization based on multiple Facebook posts of like stopping violence, and like why are people so like aggressive, and this is like a woman's issue now, and it would just go totally left field. And it's like, it for moon and Gemini, I'm trying to relate to you objectively, and for moon and Pisces, they're relating to the idealized projection of you. So for a water, for an air moon, I'm trying to be actually
Okay.
present with you.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense because you said, well, we were both talking about earlier how Moon and Gemini will just try on a bunch of different things, like almost like different identities, but it's more of an emotional perspective since it's the moon sign. And then Moon and Pisces might see like one of those identities and be like, this is the identity I want you to have.
Well, even if I haven't put on that costume yet, Moon in Pisces, like my mother is infamous for this, which is just
Mhm.
projective identification. Like, this is how I want. It's the opposite of Virgo moon, right? So Virgo moon is exists in the
Critical.
world of should. So
Yeah.
Pisces exists in a similar world of should, but except the should is is, except it's not.
Mm. Right.
So
It's like a fantasy version of
yeah, it's the
is.
fantasy version
The
of
daydream.
this is who this person is, except they're not. You're just reframing who they should be
I'm
in
sure
the.
all the Moon and Pisces people out there are feeling this so hard right now.
Yeah, I know. I apologize, but I am giving my perspective. So maybe you can become good friends with Penny one day too, and do a similar video roasting Gemini Moon, and we won't
Yeah.
care. We won't care. Uh,
Right. Well, he won't care. Yeah. He won't care.
but
I'll be like, you are so right about him.
but yeah, no, they do that. They do in a similar way that Virgo is like, these are my rules and definitions and the way life should be, and I expect people to be, and I want you to conform to that. The opposite of that is, well, this is how I see you,
Right. Yeah.
and since it's my opinion and belief of you, it must be true. I
Right.
mean,
And in fairness, just because I want to validate Moon and Pisces because they're intuitive and they know they're intuitive. But something I realized recently in a religious study I was attending is that a lot of times intuitive people sense other people's higher self. You sense their soul, this perfect version of them, or which is essentially also their potential. You sense their potential, but the reality of it is like us as humans in this incarnation, we're all imperfect, we're all flawed. Sometimes our the toxic environment might get the best of us. Like it's so much more messy than that, and it can be really painful and devastating when you sense something that was like so perfect and like as Angelo says, well, I don't think you quite said this, but it's more like a fantasy, and people say Pisces is always fantasizing about things, and like it felt like it was real, and spiritually I do think it's real, but it's like it's up here, and then like reality, like it's real in the spirit world, but in reality it's not. Does that make sense?
yeah, I the clash that I've experienced is like with my mother, for example, right, who's a Pisces moon. There is the way that she wants to see her child. And then
Yeah.
I'm trying to have a real conversation about, like, hey, by the way, your child is going through depression. Oh, don't be depressed. Have you tried being happy? Oh my God. Oh my
I don't
God.
think
How did
all
I not
Pisces
think
moon
about
would
that?
do that. I don't know. I can't imagine other Pisces moon people I know doing that.
And in romantic relationships, I think what's disheartening for Gemini moon is I'm trying to connect with you in a real, authentic way, in a fun way, in a fun, lighthearted way, but in a real way. And
Mm-hmm.
that includes me seeing you're ugly and imperfect and accepting it and loving
Right.
it. And
Right.
when
Okay.
and when and when I give myself permission to not be performative, because I could be performative too, but when I give myself permission around you to not be performative, to not have a filter, and to be real with you, and to show you perhaps my imperfections, and you take that and you're like, whoa, 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 this pops my fantasy bubble and brings me back down to reality, and I don't like this. I
Oh, yeah, that's hurtful. That's a rejection wound.
Yeah, that is like, okay, what you're saying is you want me to perform and be your Hallmark character. You want me to be a Hallmark Christmas movie. You want me to be a Disney prince. I can do that. It's exhausting, and I won't do that. No offense, So that's the disconnect with Pisces
I'm
moon.
going back to what we said in our it wasn't a Venus and Pisces video, but we talked about compatibility with Venus and Pisces and how we talked about how they can be so unconditionally loving and accepting. And I'm just like wondering, how does this Pisces energy translate here? Because of course it's the moon, it's the emotions and the deep core self
Yeah, it's
rather
not
than
Venus.
Venus, the expression. And like what I really benefit from with Venus and Pisces is like the unconditional acknowledgement of emotions. And I think for Moon and Gemini, always trying to logically bypass those emotions, it can be like, no, this emotion's not happening. And then Moon and Pisces could be like, well, what do you mean this emotion's not happening? I don't know. It would be interesting to really hear more people's perspectives on this, especially like if they're Moon and Pisces and relationships they've had with Moon and Gemini. I definitely feel like there's something deeper we can dig into here.
Yeah, I'd be interested in reading the comments too.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hope everyone, feels good about that. And we know to honor ourselves emotionally. We know how to honor how we're feeling and to honor our needs and all those things. But I love understanding the way other people operate emotionally because it's not the same way I do. Everybody's at least a little bit different, even when we do have the same moon sign. So I feel like this is really such a big awakening moment to like get to know other people and understand them more. And I mean, my personal perspective is like humanity is a whole, and we're all a different part of the same whole. So, and from what you said, Angelo, I think you'll be able to relate to this. You almost get to know yourself more by getting to know other people more too, because you see this like different side of yourself that you're not usually able to express when you dive into the world of someone else a little bit. So I love seeing healthy ways to do that. And I also love being able to understand what went wrong when that point was missed in certain relationships and what we can do better next time. But the sun has already set on the East Coast, as we can see through Angela's window. And through my window, you can see the sun is setting here in the Midwest too. So I guess that's it. Any final words?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously came at it very raw and very real,
Yeah, and I love that.
and if anybody's like creating content or putting information out there, there's a benefit to that, but I don't want
Mhm.
to I don't want anybody to look at this video or this content and be like, well, this is it. This is conclusively how Gemini moons feel about us. It's not going to
Yeah.
work. It could
Yes, I
very
said like
yeah
astrology is math and compatibility is even more complicated math. So you have to add up everything that's in both the charts to figure out whether or not it's going to work. And even then, we're humans. What do we know?
yeah, and I am presenting the negatives more so than the positives, because what I think is a shame is when you go into any kind of relationship, especially a romantic one, with rose-colored glasses, and you don't approach it with, hey, these are the things that could realistically be a tension and the
Hmm.
reason for the relationship falling apart. This is somebody's insight into why that is. What can I do to navigate, not to change who I am, right? Not to put on a performance, but what can I do to navigate that so that I can actually connect and see if I can have something that develops into something greater with this person, knowing this. So
Yeah,
I'll just caveat everything I said with that.
right. Excellent. I love it. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And
Thanks for
thank
having
you
me.
to everyone who's watching, especially if you made it all the way through. Just think about how much you learned about humanity and people's personal experiences. I love it. Okay. Talk to you soon, Angelo. Bye.